We can initialize the variable using
by
constructor. We can initialize the variable.
But why do I have to initialize the variable?
We need to operate on it, so we need to initialize it.
Perfect. So we just
To
saw
operate.
some time earlier that if you are trying to operate on something which is not having any variable, you will get a compile time error. So your variables need to be initialized. Hence, they created a concept called as constructor. Now, the constructor are of multiple types. In the code, you will see that there is nothing that I have written that is initializing first or second for that matter, right? There is nowhere written that first equals to 0 or second equals to 0, right? But now the compiler has become smart enough that it takes a look at the class, takes a look at the variables, and there is a reason why it is called as default. Why it is called as default is because based on the data type, it will initialize the variables to the default value. And the default of int is 0, and the default of int is 0. That's why f and s will be initialized to 0 by the default constructor. This constructor has some attributes. First, it is having the same name as the class name. Okay. And second, the role. Role is to initialize the variables. I'm saying I is equals to 0. That means I am creating a memory, storing the value 0, giving it a name. Constructor, on the other hand, doing the same job for all the variables inside the class. So now we have two variables. They both will be initialized to 0 automatically. So that means, coming back to this line, I have to just call the constructor. So in the interview, people will ask you, do you have to call a constructor, or is the constructor called automatically? Now take a look at the example. I created a variable I initialized the value to 10. Similarly, I created a variable calc. I am initializing it in a smarter way, different way, by saying calculator constructor, please help me and initialize this object. Here, we have to call a constructor, okay? Or else your variables will never get initialized, okay? So I want to print the value of first. What should I say?
Calculator dot first.
Right. So I just created an object. This is the last point. I just created an object. I'm saying calc, the object that I created, first variable of the object, okay? And similarly, I can say second variable of the object. Now, what would be the output?
0, 0.
0, 0.
Default.
Default. But now, last point is, I don't want it to be initialized to 0, 0. What should I do?
You can assign values to the variables.
No.
Initialize explicitly.
No. Let's stick to the concept. Who has a responsibility of initializing?
Constructor.
Constructor. So let's create a constructor. And I'll tell him that, boss, don't initialize my variables to 0. Rather, initialize them to what I want you to initialize. Now, what will be the output? Earlier, I have not created a constructor. So it was the default constructor by Java, which was initializing it to 0. Now it is a default constructor, but created by me. And this will be called here. So what will be the output now?
10, 10.
Exactly. So now this
Now
constructor is not going to
take care of that variable.
Correct. So let's put the thing where they belong. Okay. Constructor has a responsibility of initializing thing. So let's initialize the variable inside the constructor itself, not anywhere else. And with this, we are ending the concept of class, object, and constructor.